Welcome to the Starting Over Podcast. I'm your host, Edward Shelton, aka Dark Logos, and this is the show where we look at the strategies, tactics, and mechanics behind the game of heroclix. I'm just sitting here chilling. I got a second monitor hooked up, and so I am playing around with the setup where now I can look at two screens. I can know if I'm still recording. I can see if, I can look at the main screen, which has all my data information. I've been playing Apex Legends. So, brother's been having fun in that. I think I've won 4 or 5 games so far. So, I am not, winner, chicken dinner type guy, but I do all right. I do all right. I got a squad of guys that I play with, and we light it up. We get a lot of we get a lot of fourth places, and lately we've been third and second a lot. But we're pretty good. It's fun. Yeah, I don't like Origin at all. I think it's a horrible interface that I can't just add friends in game, that I have to exit out of the game, go into Origin, look for the person. Maybe if they're doing some weird lettering thing, I might not spell it properly, and then hunt them down and then add them to friends, wait for them to exit the game, add friends, and then go back into the game to play with them. So I think that whole affair is dumb, but Origin is Origin. So today what I'm going to talk about is I'm going to talk about the gameplay shift that's going to be taking place here. I'm going to tell you some things that you need to be thinking about if you're going to be playing competitive. And I also want to just bring up some ideas from the new set that I think that are going to take a hold. All right. So with that being said, let's begin. A while back at Secret Invasion or Secret Wars, I said that Black Panther is cool, but I don't think he's going to be meta, just because of how shallow his dial is and how expensive he is at 150, and at 250 is almost just too expensive to build much around him. I was wrong, and I'm willing to admit that. George Masu opened up the Pandora's box on pretty much playing Cosmic Panther, and I think that there are a lot of different ways to play him. I'm working on 3 to 4 versions right now. There's one in particular that I'm leaning more towards. But the big thing with Cosmic Panther is you can pretty much just take out Unimind and then add in Cosmic Panther, and you have an additional, and you add in Cosmic Panther and Exospecs, or Cosmic Panther and Mirror. You do one of the two. I like Exospecs personally. Exospecs allows you to do something that you normally wouldn't been able to do, which is heal. So if, let's just say, you're on click 3, which is not a horrible click, but it's really not your best click. Most people are like, well, I'm just going to go ahead and, I'm going to go to click 1 and then use still energy. Well, no, that doesn't help you. That literally does not help you at all, because you're just going to revert back to that click. So what you need to do is just attack with still energy on that click, not turn. So then you heal so that you don't change your dial at the end of the turn. And if you play it right, your opponent may or may not be able to attack you, but hopefully your opponent isn't able to attack you. And then you're just gradually able to heal up, or at least play some tricks here and there to make it tougher for your opponent to deal with you. So that's one of the main reasons I like Exospecs, but I know there are people that are going to go Symbiote. There's going to be people that go Mirror. There's going to be some people that might consider going even with the Beetle Butt, the Beetle Pod, or even with the Goblin Glider. And I know some of you would be like, Goblin Glider? Like, yeah, for real, Goblin Glider. And the main reason why Goblin Glider is because you are now able to give him permanent running shot on all of his clicks. And then on his running shot pulse wave click, you can choose to have hypersonic speed, but it really doesn't make sense on that click. Then you add toughness. So you have toughness for 3 of the clicks in which you don't have damage reduction. So you would have some damage reduction. Sorry, that's with the pod. You get the toughness, so you would have damage reduction. I apologize. So with the pod, it's the whole idea is you get the toughness and damage reduction, the +2 movement, which makes him ridiculously more aggressive. Whereas if you use the Goblin Glider, you're going to be able to have just running shot on a lot of clicks in which normally you are going to be in a poor situation on. So I like it. I think it has a lot of potential. I think there's some things that with Black Panther, you're going to find that you could go Wakanda. I'm not saying that Wakanda is competitive for big tournaments, but for Winamap, Wakanda can put in some work. Mainly, folks will sleep on Wakabi and super rare Black Panther combo with Cosmic Panther, and it's a 3-figure, theme team. But now you're +1 attack, +1 defense. So out the gate, you're hypersonic speeding with a 12 attack, 19 defense, and that makes you a lot scarier in the long run. And then you're also generating Wakandan warriors with Chair Panther. So Black Panther coming back into the game. Well, I would say is maybe mistakenly we prematurely took him out of the game. He says like, no, sir. Black History Month, you will know who is the real king of the jungle. That's my T'Challa voice. All right, so let's keep going. Unimind isn't going anywhere. Like, I don't know what it was. It seemed like everybody had Unimind fever this weekend, and they just had to play them. I've seen more Uniminds in the tournament than, like it almost reminded me like it was Rocktober once again. You were either playing Unimind or you were losing. So Unimind has a couple of different issues that I feel that aren't being addressed. Mainly because no one's just saying like, look, I'm going to play some outsiders and stop this dude from getting stat mods. And I think that's one thing. I think the other thing that a lot of people aren't really thinking about just addressing with Unimind is forcing the Unimind player into burning more IDs and then making those options being bad options. Let's be honest. Daniel Powell and Lane Miller are the tastemakers on Unimind. And so most people copy them because they're successful, which is, everyone has a full right to copy a successful person or persons in this case. But that also allows you to telegraph really hard what the IDs are. So the question comes in is, how are you going to punish those IDs? So that's something that I think most people haven't looked at. And they're like, oh, hey, I don't want to deal with Unimind, but I can play against the Unimind if Unimind does this, that, and the other. I think having map where the IDs aren't as good, making it so that Unimind actually has to directly fight, I think that's going to be a bigger thing. With this set, there are more characters, there are more characters that are useful to back up bigger characters. So there's nothing that comes in the set that's just like, now I solved my Unimind problem. I think what we more see is now I'm able to build more teams that are able to fight more types of stuff. The Tyler Spees Whales build, I personally feel that build in particular is going to stay relevant I think it's still going to be in the S class level of builds. I do think that there are going to be some problems that it's going to start encountering. And I think the one problem I think it's going to start encountering is more and more people are going to be packing Tri-Sentinel. I think Tri-Sentinel saturation is going to start being a thing. And with Tri-Sentinel starting to be a thing, opening up maps and getting certain figures like in certain places, it's going to be a problem. If you're going to be like, hey, I'm going to have Tri-Sentinel, and Tri-Sentinel is going to come out here, and I'm going to put you on this enclosed map, and as you move up, I'm going to burst down damage. You know, I'm going to send something out there to die so that I can Colossal retaliate on you, and then set up something where I can start taking out your other Colossals. So I think there are some things that need to be looked at with the Whales build, but I think if you're trying to play test against the Whales build, I think in all honesty, you need to be looking at Fancy Dan. Like, I really do think Fancy Dan has the potential to start creating problems for Whales, because Fancy Dan can create situations where he just allows high statted characters to just constantly attack, or roided characters, as I like to put them, just to attack. And I think that is a problem that could eventually be facing the Whales teams. And the big reason I say that is Whales depends heavily on being able to eat damage. And if all of a sudden I'm able to take out your defense, knock you to your stop click, and then with Fancy Dan take you off your stop click and kill you, so what? You retaliate on me. I'm just going to do the same thing again the following turn. If I can take out both Whales, and you know, start putting some damage on Minnie, or you know, you start sending retaliators over, it's like, okay, you better hit, because if you don't, I'm going to be taking out retaliators and you know, hurting Minnie. Now, the big bonus that Whales does get out of this set is they're able to pay the 5 points when they don't get map, and then just be like, look, I got a prob. Now the question would be, would that be wise? Because there are other maps for other situations, and so you'll be just throwing away 5 points, which could have been an ID or this, that, or the other. But I do think that that has some value, that if you do lose map as Whales, you could just be like, look, I got a prop. So there you go, which I think actually is a lot more useful for Whales. But you know, again, I'm not Tyler, so I don't know fully what might be percolating in his mind about that. All right, so when we start going into EarthX, there's a couple of like little guys that I'm like, you're almost there. I think Morbius is one. He has potential. Same thing with the police sergeant. You're almost there. Karnak, you're almost there. Not quite yet. Ezekiel Sims, same thing. So when we start looking at the characters that start changing the game just a little bit, I mean, first and foremost is Silver Sable, and mainly with the Fancy Dan silliness. All of a sudden, you know, you get what is that thing? The Tommy gun on her. Now she has range combat expert. You know, you get a little bit more enhancement or whatever, and she starts firing off for 6 damage, and then, you know, goes off and, you know, maybe pop somebody for 3 or 4 you know, damage. Those are very big things that are very strong 1-2 punches that can cripple a lot of different teams. And then coming in at a cheap 50 points, you know, you could just stack up Fancy Dan's, you know, a Rose and a couple of Silver Sables, you know. And there you go. And you have a Magi or Enforcers theme team right there. Now, I'm not saying that that's like the best idea, okay? I'm just going to be clear about that. But it is an idea. All right. We're going to keep moving on. There is Vulture. And the Prime, Vulture Prime. I think that the Vulture Prime will be something that people will have fun with and then see how far they can push it. And I think Vulture Prime is going to be the Paul Killer that we need. He's going to, you know, come through, clean up all those dinosaurs, clean up all those Iron Avengers, and then lay in one solid hit on an opponent and then be like, all right, whatever, Colossal retaliate me, I reset you. So, ha, ha, ha. You know, the joke's on you. And I think that's a big deal, that Vulture is able to come in and just reset all the pogs on the map if played right. Now, my sort of comeback to that is he needs to get into charge. And without a full move charge, he's not as good. Now, I know the sidestep is, you know, a little bit rainbow magic, but it's not full on good enough. I think it's okay. And it'll help him a little bit to get into play, but I don't think it's enough. So I would definitely say Vulture is going to come into the game, but I do not think that he's going to have any immediate impact. I think this is something that may percolate for 2 to 3 months and come back and bite people later on because they forgot about him. So I'm going to shout out Hired Flunky. And I think Hired Flunkies are going to start saturating the game. Just from the set, but in particular what Hired Flunkies are. There are enough characters that generate Hired Flunkies as pogs when they get leadership or whatever else, that the potential of looking at how to exploit them is there. There are a multitude of ways of doing that. I'm not going to go into it too deep, but mainly the fact that they get keywords just allows you to just do all sorts of other dumb crap with them. Them being capped at 4 is very important. And I forgot which one grants them the keywords. I don't know if it's like Fancy Dan or something else. I forgot. But there are some things to consider. That number one, with the maps that we're looking at, body blocking in most of the maps right now that are prominent in the game is a big deal. And there are a lot of maps that really refine, and I would make the argument within a 5 to a 6 square width, they limit you to that lane. And for some people, they might say that's a pretty good width. But when you start looking at a body and how a body functionally can zone out 3 squares, that's not a lot. And if you have 2 bodies, they functionally just block that lane, unless that opposing character flies to go over it. So 2 of those hired flunkies could be significant enough to start blocking off people, causing frustrations and whatnot. So yeah, Fancy Dan with the new boss every week. Like, I've already sort of covered him. I think he's just gold. I want to see what the Clicksmen come up with. Pusheen, I challenge the break Fancy Dan. Can she please break Fancy Dan for me? Please. So yeah, Fancy Dan I think is one that once we figure out what he can do outside of the whole eternity thing, I think he's going to have a lot of potential. And I think that's going to be sort of sad. I think the biggest problem that Fancy Dan will come in is that people will just think of it as it's a gimmick. And I think it's stronger than a gimmick. So the question is, like, how powerful can he get? Like, what other figures would you combine with him to make him really strong? So now what we're going to be, well, let's just keep moving on. I like the Hydras, number 10 and number 11. I think that they have a potential. I think they turn into your spam for Earth X and for your Hydra. Those are what you're going to be using to try to get theme. And they're pretty stout. They're 4 clicks for 20 points. And they're useful. And they have sidestep up front. And I think a lot of people will completely overlook their viability. The fact that they have full dial willpower. And they can modify the attack, +1 attack, and for close or range for Hydra. I think there's a lot of value there that could easily be overlooked because, you know, oh look, you're not cosmic mystical scientist, this, that, and the other, and you're only really benefiting name theme team, which is fine. I think it's completely fine that it only really benefits name theme team. I think what more we have to start looking at is what other aspects of the Hydra, you know, bonus can you have? What other characters could you sort of pump up? Like going back to Eternity. Now Eternity has like +1 attack from, you know, melee and range because of these Hydras. So there's a lot of utility there. President Osborn, I don't like. I like him. I just don't know who you pair him with to make that character more stupid. I'm not saying that that character doesn't exist, but I do know that his potential to make certain characters really good is just completely relevant. The number one character actually coming off the top of my head is Uncommon Earthworld, Elseworld's Green Lantern. So now you're running shot for 11-4 Pulse Wave. You know, all of a sudden just because of President Osborn. So I think that in and of itself is pretty good. And then you add in the whole hired flunkies that get added in, and then now we're cooking with gas. And there's a lot of stuff that I feel like could be really abusive with President Osborn. Unfortunately, I think he's going to be a local hero only. No one's going to take him seriously. Yeah, I don't think anyone's going to take him seriously. He has all the makings to be a really good figure. I just think that, unfortunately, he's not convenient enough, and that's a real big problem. Smythe is another one. I feel like he has everything he needs to be a great figure, and to be in this game, and start making some changes. But most people won't do jack with him. They're going to overlook him. They're going to make the mistake that I think most people are going to make is that he's not convenient. He doesn't fit into most teams that we want him to fit into. And because of that, he's going to just be an outlier. 50 points for what he does is really good. But at the same time, I think a lot of people are going to compare like those same 50 points to, let's just say, like Lex Luthor from Batman the Animated Series. And I would say Lex Luthor from the Batman the Animated Series does a lot more for the 50 points for that scientist keyword than Alistair Smythe, other than the fact that you have object hate. Now, going back with us knowing that the gauntlet's on its way, um, I think Alistair Smythe has a role. I just think that he won't be looked at, or better yet, uh, the the mini slayers won't be looked at until the gauntlet becomes too abusive. And once that happens, I think that people will sort of back up and start looking at him as a actual solution and try to make teams that incorporate him. Stegron, let's just be honest. Pog hordes. I'm already hearing about teams with like double and almost triple Stegron. Uh, so Stegron's going to be in the game. The question I feel with Stegron being in the game is like number one, are you playing him on theme? Are you not? If you're playing him on theme, what all are you trying to do with him? Are you trying to make him, a battle world? Are you trying to utilize battle world stuff with him? If so, like that changes some things. Like it opens up, a couple of different cool options to play with him. At the other end, I'll say this. I do not know of a battle world figure that has the battle world keyword that people are actually using or taking seriously. So he might not ever be punished by, oh nope, Strange is the only one that can punish him, but that's not that bad. So let's keep going. The Rose, same thing. He's going to be on those Magi teams. Fortunately, he has Hydra, so you can start playing some cool little tricks with him. So I like that. So yeah, the Rose is a figure that I would say like definitely get your hands on. Definitely get your hands on. Right. And I know some people like Big Fancy Dan. I'm really just not a fan of Big Fancy Dan. So yeah. I still feel Clea is a trap. I think that some people may say like Goblin Glider plus Clea equals fun. And then I'll throw in some the Mighty Thor or Loki's with God of Trickery and try to play off some stuff with that. And I think that would be amusing, but I don't think it's enough to play her, considering she really doesn't have damage reduction. And so there are too many teams that just come in and one-shot her or just do way too much damage. And so if I eat one or two Mystics just to get your 1/3 of your team off the field, I'll do that. Lady Octopus, no one's really playing that, so I feel a little sad for her. Excuse me. Now, I've talked a lot about Iron Man in the last show with the set review, so I would just tell you, go listen to the last show, and I just pretty much break down Iron Man and why Iron Man is going to show up in the game. The issue with Iron Man is what type of teams is Iron Man going to show up with. There's already debates about which Iron Avengers can he and can he not bring in when he's not on the Stark Tower map and all this other jank. So I would just tell you, go listen to the other show about Iron Man, and we'll just leave it at that. All right. Venom Cap. Venom Cap, or Captain Venom, sorry. Captain Venom is going to show up. I already see people talking all like hardcore about Captain Venom. And the main reason I feel like Captain Venom becomes a thing is the fact that he makes monsters a name theme, a keyword. And there's a lot of just cool stuff that you could do with that. Even going with the whales, that all of a sudden that now the whales can prob and use theme prob, and that makes them a lot stronger. The leadership is okay. But it's this other part here. When another friendly character with the monster keyword attacks, modifies attack by +1 if Captain Venom attack this turn. So you have a high incentive of starting the turn with him and then just doing everything else with everyone else. And giving a +1 stat bump to everybody across the board is just strong. So there's no reason to ignore it. So I think he's going to show up as a tactic. The question I am really wondering is how many people are going to just dump the money in to get him. Number two, are we going to see him at 75 or 50? Because if we see him at 50, we only have one click of that leadership. And you're playing a lot safer with him. And I know he has shape change and plasticity and automatically breaks away and all the other cool stuff. But you're less likely to just go gung-ho, in my opinion, with him if he's 50 points and 4 clicks. So I know there's some secondary tactics that I think could show up, like Inhumans, and I mainly think Inhumans are really not bad. I just don't think that you have the points to make them great. And I think that when you start looking deeper at your synergies, you're picking a piece and then throwing Karnax at it. That's functionally it. You're like, oh, I have Black Bolt and 3 Karnax, or I have 2 Karnax and a Medusa. Like, I think that's what you start seeing within humans. Like in humans, for a lack of a better word, they're really are not solid. They're functional. And I know some people are going to be like, Edward, you hating dude. But that's how I look at it, is there's just not enough solid stuff there for you to build a really good team around. So let's sort of go into it and really like break it down. Why it's like Inhumans are nice, but they aren't at the top of the food chain. Okay, so let's start off with who I feel is the bigger of your figures, is Black Bolt. Okay, so Black Bolt comes in with the leadership, and he can hit hard. And like I said in the review, he's a noob cannon. But again, you're running, 2 Karnax just so that he can get his stats up. And actually, you're not even running a Medusa because she's way too expensive. Because you need the Karnax over the Medusa. So, yeah, you're spamming Karnax so that your Black Bolt can just run out there and scream like crazy. You can run them at 100, and then, like I said, you can introduce Medusa and start playing with the points a little bit better. But now he's just a running shot figure that's really, really, really subpar. And you might get lucky, and because you're looking at the click number thing, that all of a sudden he might get +2 attack or +2 damage or +2 range or whatever else. Those things are nice, but they're not going to get him over in most situations. And then you have Triton, which you're going to need theme. And so you're like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to need theme. So I need water. And then what maps have water and what maps are going to make me useful on water? And so you have a problem there. So if you look at like Synapse is sort of like semi-spammable, Lockjaw, okay, great. So I brought him on the team. So I have Lockjaw, uh, Karnak, and Black Bolt. Yay, that's not doing much. You have Black Knight, who I think is respectable, but he doesn't do enough. The stiff upper lip allows him to recover, and after he's made that first initial hit, he could possibly do something because he's going to be on click 3 or 4. But still, you don't want to use him. He's 100 points that's going to end up getting lit up most of the time. Now, again, another like low point character that you can like look at. That's okay, but really you don't want to be forced to use it. Is Devil Dinosaur and Moon Girl? It's not worth it. You're 4 clicks. You're not playing Miss Marvel, and yeah, that's mostly it. So Gorgon is nice, but you're going to have to do like Gorgon, Medusa, 2 Karnaks. And you see how limiting it is. Or even, Gorgon, Lockjaw, 2 Karnaks. So I think it's something that you can prove to your locals that you're better than them by playing the theme. But I also think that unless you can go Golden Age, Inhumans really is not that good. I think that's something that some people might get distracted by. Other than that, I would say from team building perspective, I don't see most of the archetypes changing. I think we might maybe see some more animal teams and some more teams focused around Black Panther, but that's mostly it for right now. I think we're going to have like a little bit of a pause, and people are going to try to figure out how they're going to potentially maximize some of the figures, and when they realize there aren't a lot of major disruptors, then they're going to go back to business as usual. And I also think a lot of people want to ride certain figures that have been really huge game staples until they retire. So we're going to see Overdrive for a while, which could lead more people to Photons as we're getting more and more Pogs. And I would make the argument that Photon plus Mudman equals good times. It just does. So who knows? Who knows? All right. But yeah, I think the major problem that we're moving into is I call it why didn't we play it earlier problem. And that it pretty much goes like this, and something that Patrick Yapico brought up on Majestics, I think maybe 2 shows back, is look at X Team. It has a whole lot of older figures. Why didn't we play blankety blank blank? And realistically, whenever I hear that, what comes to my mind is because the market forces didn't demand it. And it's something, it is really something that simple. And I know I'm sort of using like a economic term, but it goes something along the lines of this. A couple of years ago when Pat won with Quinjet, I went to Tulsa Rock after Worlds, and I said to myself, I'm going to see a bunch of Quinjet. And because of that, I need to be ready to have an anti-Quinjet team. And what I fought like the entire time 2 Quinjets out of like a 20-man field, 20-ish man field. So less than 10% was Quinjet. But I fought there were a crap ton of Cranks. It's a crap ton of Cranks. Now, why was that? Was it because the Quinjet was the worst build? No, it just won Worlds. Okay. But why Crane? Well, Crane was economically accessible. Okay, so let's look at it like this. Back then, Quinjet was easily a $500 team, maybe even higher depending on which at when you're buying the ID cards, because there were certain IDs that were just $50 to $100 themselves. So when you start looking at it, for that tournament, our forecasting in Phoenix Nest was really off, like super off, and we started to ask ourselves later why. And when we did the money math, it made sense. It just made sense why more people felt that they wanted to go and play Crane. Okay, so you can sort of take it a little bit further as well. Let's just say people like shredders. Well, why do people like shredders? Well, if they've already invested in shredders, shredders are effective. They place, they always seem to break. On average, their win rate is quite high. Of course, I'm going to, play shredders. Okay, so if I see the field out of 20 people, I see 5 shredders, and there's still other things out there. If I have a build, and I apologize, I just realized my gain is probably really hard up because I moved my mic. But if I see that I have a team and it just doesn't do that great against shredders. It's okay, but it just doesn't do that great against shredders. Then you know what's going to happen? I'm not going to put that build out there. So when shredders retires and I put that build out there and it might have a lot of older elements, folks will be like, oh my gosh, why didn't we see this before? Where did this Ultra Instinct God Key Super Saiyan team come from? Brought to you by Majestic's Apex Predators. Oh my gosh, Patrick hiding the super secret tech. Oh my gosh, Daniel Powell diverted from Unimind for one tournament to show us his true brilliance. Oh my gosh, PJ Bolin acts like PJ Bolin and plays something that we just didn't expect. You know. and I say all that in good fun, people. I say all this in good fun. Don't be trying to start E-dramas over nothing. But real talk, a lot of the time that these things become viable is just because something else isn't there, or let's be honest, most of us are lazy. Most of us are lazy. And I know some folks will be like, well, yes, there's that homebrew guy out there playing competitive, and I'll be honest, most of the homebrew guys, unless they take it in stride, they got beaten out of competitive. Rock competitive play and WizKids competitive play probably about 1.5 years ago. Like those guys, it's like, you know what? I'm gonna do it my way. I'm gonna listen to old Sinatra. I'm gonna get, my Thor. Yeah, that Thor. The one that's able to call down all the lightning. That Thor. I'm gonna team him up with that ADW Iron Man. Then I'm gonna 1-2 these fools. Those guys are gone. Those guys are gone. So you're now dealing with what I would more like to call the invested interest people. Okay, the invested interest people. So people that they're gonna be like, man, I travel. Do I really want to waste my money? I'd rather know that I played something that has a 75% chance to win than to play something with unknown odds. So there are always people that come out there just because their skill set are able to be tastemakers, that are able to set the tempo for new stuff. You know, they have the audiences to do so. Dan and PJ are prime examples of it. Okay. I think eventually, like on the come up, like Steve DiCarlo will eventually be one. Tony may be one as well on the West Coast. Aaron already is to a degree in his own right. So bringing up Aaron is sort of redundant, but yeah, when I look at the West Coast, that's where I see like your West Coast tastemakers are going to be. So when those cats play stuff, people pay attention. And so there's two mindsets that come in. Either I'm building for what these cats are talking about, and either playing it, or I'm trying to counter it, you know, or I'm trying to find something in between. And that's what you get. So when these random things just appear, it's because someone says like, "Oh my gosh, there's a weakness in the market. If I buy 2 shares of Stegron oil, just 2 shares, I could dominate the market, and my returns will be exponential." But I mean, the game's always been like this, and pretending like it hasn't been is, I guess, a little bit short sighted. Now, I will say this, and I had a conversation with some people the other day, and with the upcoming release of the Infinity Gauntlet again into the game sphere, the question arises, is the Infinity Gauntlet just going to replace all other equipment? Or just about all other equipment? And I think that's a good question, because if the Infinity Gauntlet comes out and it's just as good as we think it is, you can start asking yourself, was it fool's gold to go in and buy all these other figures that came with equipment because it's all underpowered, you know, in comparison to the Infinity Gauntlet? At the same time, you could say, hey, look, I have the Infinity Gauntlet on X figure, and now I put this on figure B, and my force just overall is a lot more stronger. So I see a lot of different inputs. I do not see a situation in which you have gems, and then you start with gems or the gauntlet attached. I think there has to be something where you gradually either get the gems, or if they all start on the field, I think that would be fairer, versus you just assign the Infinity Gauntlet and all the gems that's attached to the Infinity Gauntlet at the beginning of the game to a character. Or I just hope that you have to at least try to pick it up, because if not, Infinity Gauntlet is going to be it's going to be the focus of the game for a bit, and I don't see DC being able to come back and offer us a same level of, I don't see it getting the same level of oomph out of many of the objects in the DC universe. And I don't ever see you quantifying the anti-life equation. You know, I just don't. And definitely considering on and how many different takes on the anti-life equation exist, I really don't see that happening. So overall, I think that the game is going to have no major like destabilization immediately in the next 2 to 3 weeks. I think we're going to see some experiments with the new set.
I think going towards nationals, that's when we're going to start seeing peaks of what people think is good. And I'm going to also tell people this as well. Folks are going to be like, but X-Men is gone. Ha ha. I'm like, no, man. X-Men isn't gone. I think X-Men is biding its time for U.S. nationals to come back and being like, yo, man, Hawkeye isn't here to save you. What's up now, homies? What's up? And I think that's a big deal, because without Hawkeye and, you know, a couple of other things there to save them, what are most people going to do? And I don't know if the tank retires either. Because if the tank retires, ooh boy, that's going to be a problem. Because how people were dealing with Wolverines was sort of goes away. I mean, the same thing, like Wales would love it if the tank retires. So I look at what's coming down in the immediate future, and I see some minor destabilizations, but we're only going to see bigger changes or people sort of peeking behind, trying to fire some shots, with that sniper downrange, come closer to like June when we get closer to nationals. And when that happens, then I'm like, yeah, it's on. It's on now. But until then, I want to say that there aren't many things that are making people think outside of the box. And there aren't a lot of reasons for people to try to think outside the box. And because of that, it leaves us in this, I would say, micro limbo, where a lot of the stuff that we want to do or can do, we're thinking it's possible, but I don't think most people want to like take the risk to go to the major tournament and play it. So I think that's a reality. I am looking forward to see how people are going to be looking at exospecs after the Infinity Gauntlet comes out. Now, I know that's, again, we have to wait and find out what the Infinity Gauntlet does and all the other jazz, blah, blah, blah. I get that. But I actually wonder what would happen. And I would say, if the Infinity Gauntlet isn't exactly pick a power, but you have a selection of powers, yeah, I think that would be pretty cool. Whereas I would definitely say that the exospecs limitations defensively could easily be placed, easily be used as making aggressive characters more aggressive instead of making defensive characters capable. But that's just a thought process I had. Anyway, that's it for today's show. It's been a while since I've had the ramblings of Dark Logos. You can email me at, you can follow me on Twitter at StartOverPod. Wow. I almost did this out of order. It came from outer space and told me, yeah, I see you out there, other YouTubers. I see you trying to go to outer space. But no, only my Twitter does. So, yeah. Anyway. You can email me at startingoverpodcast@gmail.com. That's startingoverpodcast@gmail.com. If you wish to opine, keep it piffy, keep it interesting, keep it Autobot, baby. Let me know what you think about this new set, ideas that you're trying to do. Yeah, you can donate to the show at startingoverpodcast@gmail.com. That's startingoverpodcast. Sorry, I glitched up. Sorry, you can donate to the show at startingoverpodcast.blogspot.com. And everything you donate helps the show. So yeah, that's it. That's it for today's show. I'd like to thank you all for listening, and remember,